Good afternoon. You guys are a lot closer than you usually are. It's a little intimidating, but we're very glad you're here. Thank you for joining us, and thanks to Skip Rutherford and to everyone here at the Clinton School for this wonderful partnership. It's unique in our experience, and we're delighted to be back for another year of talking about the creation of theater and theater as an art form and how the Rep looks to create works specifically for you in our community. Let's take a moment and let each of our actors introduce themselves. The mic just go away. And tell us what role you're playing and tell the audience where you're from.
Hi, I'm Avery Clark. I'm playing Henry V. I live in New York, but I'm originally from Fort Smith, Arkansas.
Of course I have to follow that. My name is Nikki Coble. I'm playing Princess Catherine. I'm from Hopkinton, Massachusetts, but I live in New York.
Hi, I'm Mitch Tebow. I'm playing the Archbishop of Canterbury and Pistol, and I'm a Yankee. I'm from New York City.
Hi, I'm DC Wright. I am the fight director for the production, and I also am playing Westmoreland and Gower, and I am from Illinois right now.
That sounds transitory, DC. You notice that both Mitch and DC introduced themselves and mentioned that they were playing more than one role, and we'll talk about that in just a second. We're kicking off our 37th season, and I think the first question is, why would the Rep choose to kick off its 37th season with Shakespeare, and on top of that with Henry V? Henry V is a fascinating play. You know, if it was an HBO series or a cable TV series, it would be between the Borgias and the Tudors. And it's one of the most fascinating periods in world history to me. I first saw the play Henry V, first became acquainted with it in acting school. Joe Menino's here somewhere, he's in our play, and Joe and I went to acting school together, and we worked on Henry V in acting school, and right after that I went over to England. And I saw the Royal Shakespeare Company production of Henry V in the mid-'80s, and it starred a young actor by the name of Kenneth Branagh. And that production that I saw has stayed with me through all these years. And I've had the opportunity to work on a number of Shakespearean plays, but I've never had the opportunity until now to work on Henry V. And really, to launch a play like Henry V, the stars have to align. You have to believe that you have the creative team, you have to believe that you have the actors who can come together to collaborate to bring this wonderful play to life. There are 52 characters in Henry V. Henry V premiered around 1599. It is one of Shakespeare's 8 history plays. It is the end of the first tetralogy that begins with Richard II and goes through Henry IV Part I, Henry IV Part II, Henry IV Part III, and then Henry V. It is the chronicle of the 100 Years' War. Shakespeare wrote a second set of history plays based on the War of the Roses, which kind of revolves around the play Richard III. But Henry V culminates this first series of history plays, and in my opinion, is one of the most relevant today, to our audiences today, one of the most relevant plays that Shakespeare ever wrote, because it deals with power, it deals with the choices leaders make, it deals with, perhaps we have noble ambitions, but sometimes our means are a little gray. To me, the play is summed up in a phrase by Oscar Wilde, actually, in his play Lady Windermere's Fan, when he says, some of us, or all of us are living in the gutter, and some of us are looking at the stars. And to me, that sums up the character of Henry. It's not a black and white world, and our world today is not a black and white world. There are so many shades of gray in our leadership, in the choices we make as a nation. Our goals are always, often, and I would say always, lofty, but sometimes the means we use to achieve our ends can be perceived as gray areas. And so that's one of the reasons I think the play Henry V is so relevant. Henry V is based on the historic character, Henry V. The play centers around, or focuses around, Henry V's invasion of France in 1415. And if I mess up my facts, you can correct me, or we can pretend I'm right, which is okay too. Henry had only been king for less than 2 years, and like all young kings, he had something to prove. There was discord at home. So, of course, a foreign invasion could help rally his citizens. The church at the time was willing to invest in the war, so he had the means to do the invasion. He invaded France. He attacked the walled city of Harfleur. The invasion took much longer than he expected. That siege took much longer than he expected. It drained his troops. It drained his resources. He was ultimately victorious, but the price was very high. He then decided to move west and head towards Calais. And on the way to Calais, he encountered a significant French force near the walled town of Agincourt. And it's that battle that has become a rallying cry for Englanders for the past many hundred years. And in fact, Henry V is often used as a propaganda play. If you've seen Laurence Olivier's film version of Henry V, made during the Second World War, that play then was used as a rallying cry to rally Englanders and all of Great Britain to the defense of the realm. But Henry V also, in later years, has been used as an anti-war play. And in fact, I've seen productions of it that was set in the Vietnam War, because it's also a play of aggression, and it's also a play of cruelty. There was a line in the play that sort of gets played with a lot in different productions. If you've seen the Kenneth Branagh film, there was a line in Act 4 when Henry believes that the French are counterattacking and could perhaps beat his diminished band. He has the line, "Then kill all the prisoners," which is something the real Henry V did in fact order. He ordered the execution of the French prisoners. It has been very controversial. He ordered the execution of French prisoners. That line is in our production, but you won't find it in the Kenneth Branagh film. Branagh took that line out because he wanted his Henry to be more heroic and more grand and more honorable than the Henry that Shakespeare created. And so, like all directors, we edit, we change things, we move things around. I've done the same thing in our production as well, in ways that I think help tell our story more effectively. Because, of course, if you can't improve upon Shakespeare, who can you improve upon? And the Battle of Agincourt, you know, if you've ever studied history and studied the Battle of Agincourt, it is a fascinating battle. The French should have won by sheer numbers. But they lost horrendously, and partly it was the architecture of the battlefield. Big woods, narrow little passageway. The English were here and the French attacked, and they were in a field, and it had been raining for days, and it was knee-deep mud, and the French soldiers wore 60 pounds of armor. And they were unhorsed, and they drowned in the mud. They became victim to the English the longbows, which could penetrate the armor, and they were slaughtered. And you can imagine in that time that the perception that God was on England's side could be very apparent when you lose 20,000 troops on one side and less than 5,000 on the other. And the numbers about how many died are all over the map. In the play, they say 10,000 on one side and 125 on the other. But it is an incredible, epic story in our history. And to bring this epic story to life on our stage has been a daunting task. But it has been a fascinating task, and one that I commend these folks who are on our stage and our cast who are with us here in the audience today for working so diligently these past 22 days to bring this remarkably huge epic story to life. When you come see the play at the Rep, the play begins in a cathedral, it moves to the English court, it moves to a bar in Southampton, it moves to the coast of Southampton, it moves to Harfleur, it moves to Agincourt, it moves to the French court, it moves back to the French court. It's all over the map. And so it is just in terms of telling the story, just in pure advancing the plot, we're challenged. Then on top of that, when you add in, of course, it is in Shakespearean, it is in Shakespeare's words, Shakespeare's language, that also creates certain distance that it's our job to break down those barriers and to make this story and this play and these words come to life for you. And so I want to now turn it over and ask some questions of these actors and let them talk to you about their experience bringing Henry V to life. And I'm going to start with Avery. He's playing Henry V. Avery, you may recall, was in our production of Hamlet a couple of years ago, playing Hamlet. And then also in our production of 39 Steps. He and Nikki were both in our production of 39 Steps. They clearly liked 39 Steps better than Hamlet. Avery, let's start with you. This is an iconic character. It's one of those roles that every actor wants to play. Great actors have defined their careers playing Henry V. No pressure. Tell us about what's it like to play Henry V? How do you go about doing it? What preparation do you engage in? And then tell us also, how different is it from playing Hamlet? Or is it different?
Oh gosh, I hate microphones because we spend all night in a room much larger than this talking without them, so it's very odd. How do I prepare? How did I prepare for Henry V? Gosh, I'll start with the second part of the question first. Of how is it different than Hamlet? It's greatly different from Hamlet. Hamlet, as bizarre of a confession as it is actually a character closer to me as a person. Where Hamlet is very internal, it's a lot of emotion going on. He has these soliloquies to the audience, and he's explaining how he feels. Where with Henry, he's kind of more of a man of action. Every scene there is a piece of action that happens where Hamlet's tragic flaw is his inactivity or inability to make a quick decision. He doesn't give into rashness, where Henry is very rash, but he's always in a public eye. Where Hamlet is it's kind of a family drama, Hamlet is. It's him and his mom and his uncle and his friends and his girlfriend. So it's a very close-knit story, but with Henry V, it's so much larger in scope. So I guess the most intimidating thing about the character for me was the inspirational aspect of it. I don't play inspiring people, ever. So I trying to find that aspect of him, but with all great characters, especially with Shakespeare, and Henry V has the third most lines of any Shakespearean character, followed, I believe, by Iago, and then Hamlet has the most. So it's still a daunting task, but with all of that language, the character's already written there for me. And the only difference is, in the structure of the play, it's very episodic. Hamlet kind of takes place over the course of a few days, depending on how long he was on a ship with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, and then pirates attack, whatever that's about. But it's very episodic, so it's like, okay, this is the tennis ball scene, like his first scene. Then he deals with some traitors. Then we fast forward, and we have this wonderful chorus character that says, okay, audience, go along with us, we're fast forwarding time. So there's this convention of, it is very cinematic in scope, where it's like, with Hamlet, I was on stage the entire time, and people came on and gave me information, I responded. With this, I have to go into each scene with a set of given circumstances. So I kind of have to, after we had our first preview audience, like, ooh, I can't just walk out on stage and do this one, I kind of got to pump myself up a little bit. But it's, the character is, like all great characters, are an amazing contradiction. And I working with Bob on this and doing my work in New York was just finding his flaws, which I personally always like to find the flaws in a character. I always like to find his humanity, his sense of humor, which is something I really tried to find in Hamlet, was because that's how I relate. That's how I deal with when I'm upset. I get snarky, as he's seen in rehearsal, with a biting sense of humor. And so you try to find, you just try to find every aspect of a character. And a lot of things I do with characters is I'll either watch the films. I saw the Branagh, which I think is fantastic. I saw that one first, and I haven't looked at it since, because to me, that is Branagh's best film. I think his work in that is phenomenal, and it is a great movie. If you haven't seen it, it's a fantastic movie and a fantastic cutting of it. And of the different films of it out there, that's the one I related to the most. That's the one I want to stay the furthest away from, because I didn't want it to influence me too much. But he starts as the king. You see him on the throne in the beginning, and you watch him slowly. With each scene, he's talking with the court. Then he's talking with the nobility, with this traitor scene. Then in his next scene, he's talking with his troops. And then by the time we get to our Act 2, he's talking with commoners. So you see him slowly coming into his humanity. Then after he talks with these common people, it's the first and only time in the play you see him alone. And he talks to the audience, and you see this. You see a person coming out of it. So it was fun to try to find this, going from royalty to a person, and seeing what he has done, the repercussions of this enormous task that he has on his shoulders, that he brought upon himself and of his people. And I'm not answering the question.
No, you are. It's okay.
Am I? I don't know. I don't know about that. But I did do the historical research on him, but again, this is Shakespeare's recreation of him, so I honestly looked more at what Shakespeare has given me, not what history has given me, because there are some discrepancies between the two. And I couldn't get too bogged down. Well, he had a bad stutter or something like that. It's like, well, I can't do that. I don't think he had a stutter. He had
a hideous scar on his face.
Yeah, he had an arrow shot through his face, like literally.
It went on the side of his nose and lodged in the back of his skull.
Yeah, so I didn't use it because that would probably hamper a lot of those lines. And this pale, English king, pale, pasty. But no, again, to sum this rant up, I looked for his humanity, and I looked for his flaws, which is, if anything, anger. He has a temper, which is kind of fun because Hamlet didn't. So I tried to contrast them. The characters are completely different. At the end of this play, I have energy, a little bit left. At the end of Hamlet, I wanted to die. I was so tired. At this one, I still have a little bit of juice left.
Which is really good for the student matinee days.
Yeah, oh my God.
And Avery brings up a good point that, we are not looking to create a museum experience. We're attempting to bring a play to life as if we're approaching it for the first time, even though it has this artistic footprint of over 400 years. And we're also not looking to capture the historic Henry V. We're looking to capture Shakespeare's Henry V. Shakespeare's Henry V is not the historic Henry V. It's based on history, but of course the concept of history to Shakespeare, objective history particularly, very different animal than it is to us. And so this sense of history and where Shakespeare drew his references. And there was a play called Henry V that was existent during Shakespeare's lifetime that he was very familiar with. Shakespeare, like all good writers, stole from everybody. And so there was a play called Henry V that we don't think of or remember anymore that Shakespeare used to create his story. But he's creating his story for his audience. And then we're taking that germ and creating our story for our audience. Now, for me, my personal taste is always to honor the text. I don't look to manipulate Shakespeare to tell in some sort of contemporary take. I think that's your job as audience members. I believe that we can all come to this table, that we can all bring this story to life, honoring the text that Shakespeare gave us, using the wonderful instrument of these actors to tell this story. And we can then, which is the wonderful thing about a timeless play, is that we can draw our own conclusions about its relevance to our lives, our times, and our circumstances. And that's one of the things that Avery does, is Avery is wonderful with the text, but he makes the ideas of the play very accessible to a modern audience. And that's so important to me, that it's not stuffy, it's not distant, but it's right there and it's immediate. Now let's talk speaking of distant, no, Nikki, let's talk about, Nikki has a tough job in this play because 80% of her lines or 90% of her lines are in French. Now see, you're thinking, oh, I'm not going to go see that. But there is a point to it. And its relevance appears in the fifth act, which is one of the best payoffs, particularly in a history play. Because Act 5 is one of the most different scenes, and it is a scene, the act is a scene, that I've ever experienced working on Shakespeare, because you have this intense drama, this war powers drama, and then Act 5 is almost like a romantic comedy. It's a beautiful little transition. And Nikki is responsible for that transition. So Nikki, we've seen you now, this is our third play we've seen you in at the Rep. You played Ophelia in Hamlet. You played the female character in 39 Steps. And now here you are playing the female character in Henry V.
Well, there are two.
There are two, that's true. You're the princess.
Yeah. Boy.
That's right.
Again.
So tell us about you don't speak French, do you?
No, I do not speak French.
So how do you do that?
I had some very generous friends who are fluent in the city who sat with me, who recorded the sounds that I would need to make, and also used, there are many, many different texts of Henry V that break down all the French for those of us who don't speak French to say what's going on. And it becomes very clear that my character is in a position where she knows she's going to have to meet Henry and is aware that she doesn't speak English. So she is getting an English lesson from her position as a person who does not speak it. So it's kind of the reverse. And so I needed to know what she was saying in English, translated into French, for my own mind. So as an actor, the exercise was about being very specific about what I was asking so that I would be able to marry that to the French. It would help me memorize it. And then just playing it on the subway, muttering to myself on the subway, which happens a lot in New York City. It pretty much goes unnoticed. But just getting that in my mouth so that it was comfortable and that I wouldn't be thinking about how it needed to sound when I'm on stage. And so my job is to make it very clear to you that I'm speaking another language and that while you don't know the language, you will still understand what's going on.
Now, okay, I'm going to get personal for a second. Because I'm interested...
Is now a good time?
Well, I'm interested in knowing this too. You and Avery have you worked on 3 shows here. Mm-hmm. In real life, you are, I hope you still are, a couple.
Yeah, for these 5 minutes.
And do you ever, like, how does the relationship you play on stage, does it ever influence your lives outside of the theater, or when you walk out the door of the theater, you just drop it and you just do whatever you do?
I think, well, for me at least, I pay better attention to him on stage than I do in life. Because it's so essential to making it new for ourselves every night. It would be very obvious to the audience watching it on some level, some subconscious level, if I wasn't actually relating to him in this moment. So sometimes we call it kind of throwing a ball, but if he says a line in a different way, then I hear it in a different way, and my response, you know, is a continuation of that cycle. So there's a generosity that and a trust that, given that he is my friend and my boyfriend, it is nice to know that I'm fully supported on stage and that I can trust that anywhere he wants to go, I can follow, or anywhere that I take him, he'll follow, which is a good thing. I don't know if he's agreeing with that right now.
I was just thinking of things I could do and just like pull the stool out from underneath you or something. I don't know, I think that it's there's pros and cons to that. I talked to Stafford about this, who he and his wife worked with you as well. That when you do have a couple that works together, there's not that process of getting to know each other. You know, it's like, oh, is this okay? Is you know, of building this trust. But there's also, you can also cross the line too of, you don't have the formality anymore. You're like, can you just don't do it like that and just do this? Like, you know, you can start. There's these borders at most. Yeah, you can be bossy with each other. It's like can you just move further that way when we do this? You know, you can be really just kind of bitchy to each other. You know, so but no, we don't. I think pretty much after rehearsal.
I had another thought.
I didn't mean to start something. This could have been,
No.
This could
You
go
haven't.
somewhere we don't want.
I actually was meaning to pay him a compliment in that you were talking about before what it's like for this to be my 3rd experience here. As Ophelia, it was a role that was very close to me. It was kind of for an actress like a Juliet, something that you want to get your hands on, and then you get your hands on it and you freak out because it's the one time you'll get to do it. And in 39 Steps, it was something that was much more fun. I get to come on every time with a more fabulous costume and a more fabulous accent. And this time, I'm on stage twice. So I spend most of my time in the dressing room listening to the show. And I get to feed off of the energy of coming in to carry a play that's happening mostly without me. And so I really do get to enjoy, is this going to mess you up? Listening to him from downstairs, and in the same way that I watched him backstage on Hamlet, and just to admire the humanity that he brings to it. I think that that support keeps me locked in a different way than if it were just all sort of happening and I didn't have a stake invested in who was taking that play forward.
Well, and that chemistry is very clear, and we take advantage of it as audience members, knowing that you do have that shorthand and you do have that relationship. It reads on stage. And it's interesting, she plays the Princess Catherine, and in real life, Princess Catherine gave birth to one child. Henry and Catherine did get married several years. In our play, it looks like it happens right after the battle, but how many years is it? It's several years, 5, I think, after the actual Battle of Agincourt, that Henry's chief demand of the French king is his daughter. And so she really is a spoil of war, although that issue is not particularly dealt with thoroughly in the play itself. It was the reality of the situation. They had one child who became Henry VI. Henry died when the boy was 9 months old, which led to incredible turmoil and strife and revolution, warfare in England, which led to the rise of Richard III, and which, of course, then his downfall was at the hands of her grandchild. And she remarried, Catherine, I don't mean you personally, Catherine remarried after Henry died. Henry died when he was, what, 35? And Catherine, about 5 or 6 years later, remarried a gentleman from her court whose last name happened to be Tudor. And so it was Catherine who gave rise to the Tudor line, which succeeded after Richard III. And so Catherine is really, from a historic point of view, she's the winner. Henry was felled by dysentery in France, actually, in another campaign. Okay, I'll digress on this for a second because it's interesting in kind of a gross kind of way. Henry's army was decimated by dysentery throughout the campaign that led up to the Battle of Agincourt. And we know that, from history, we know that the archers played such an important role, the English archers. Henry had far more archers than the French had. The French were primarily armored. So the English archers were decisive in the battle. The English archers were racked by dysentery. They fought the battle without their trousers.
We are not doing that in the production. Just so.
That's the after-hours cabaret version of this show that we're not doing.
It's a secret of warfare. I don't know. But I learned that fact, and I told that fact to the actors in the first rehearsal, and that was exactly their reaction. Are we doing that? No. But speaking of the various characters in the play, I want to turn to Mitch Tebow. Mitch is in his first production at Arkansas Rep, whereas he's the only one among the foursome up here who's making his debut at Arkansas Rep this year. And Mitch has the distinction of playing two very different characters. Shakespeare's structure, his standard verse structure is iambic pentameter, and the nobility always speak in verse. Not always, usually speak in verse. And the lower characters, the characters who are commoners, speak in prose. And Mitch's character, Mitch plays the sort of leading commoner, the character of Pistol, and he also plays the Archbishop of Canterbury, a heightened character that speaks primarily in verse. Pistol, the leader of the low characters, the commoners, speaks in prose. So, Mitch, is there a difference in how you approach those roles? I mean, for the first 15 minutes of the play, you just
Hopefully,
talk.
yes.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, first of all, it's not uncommon when you're doing a Shakespearean production, for there to be doubling and to play several roles within a cast. We have 19 members in our cast. We're covering 50-some roles, etc. And probably in Shakespeare's time, their production cast was not much larger than that. You can obviously see in most of Shakespeare's plays how they're structured. Actually, they're stagecrafted so that people can be one set of characters over here and then go backstage and become another set of characters over there. It's very interesting to do that in a production because it is a challenge. And these are two very, very different characters. The first is the Archbishop of Canterbury, who is not only a religious figure but is a political figure in the play. Remember, this is pre-Reformation. So it's still the Catholic Church, and the Catholic Church is not beholden to the King of England. And there is much political negotiation going on in the opening of the play regarding some laws that are going to be passed that the Archbishop and the Church don't want, and they're offering in return money to Henry for his campaign. So there's a lot of politics going on there as well. Now the other character is Pistol. Pistol is a low comedy character who actually originates in the Henry IV plays as part of Falstaff's cohorts and themes. He is a thief and a braggart, and his motivations are entirely venal. He is a mercenary. He is going to war to get what he can out of it. It's not about glory. It's not about honor. It's a very nice contrast to what is being stated about Henry in the play. When you're working on that as an actor, of course, the first thing, as Avery stated, is you look at the text. You look at what the text tells you about the characters. And then you try to find a funny walk for each one of them. No, that's that.
Now, see, they're believing you.
I think I found them. I think mostly, as you do with any character, you start looking at the objectives of the character. What do I want? What am I trying to achieve? And when you start looking at that, then you start figuring out, well, how do I achieve that? What is my strategy? What is my tactic in achieving that? And that begins to give you clear separation between the two characters. Canterbury is a person who speaks fact. He comes on stage and for about the first 10 minutes of the play does nothing but speak fact after fact after fact, right? With a purpose of sort of manipulating Henry into providing what they want. Pistol, on the other hand, is a person who rarely speaks truth in the play. He exaggerates and he uses language in a sort of florid, misappropriate way. He thinks of himself as an erudite fellow, but he really is a bumpkin. And so once you start identifying those two tracks, then you start finding physical things and approaches to the character and attacks on the line that allow you to separate it. And hopefully, you're not too confused when I walk on, a scene later as somebody else. It's not like you're going to go, oh, he's totally different. No, you'll know it's me, but you'll see the difference between the characters and therefore be able to track what they are adding to the storyline to advance the plot and play.
Our job is to tell stories. And when you have a rich resource like Henry V, you have many choices that you can make in your storytelling. There's many different directions you can go. The artistic footprint for Henry V is huge. But it's as if we're doing a new play because we're creating everything from scratch and we're making decisions about this play at this time for this audience. One of the key ingredients of Henry V, because it is a war play, are the battles that we see in the play, and there are several of them. The stage combat is a key ingredient in the storytelling. And we're fortunate to have a wonderful fight choreographer storyteller with us for this production. One of the cool things about this play, and it's been mentioned, that one of the devices that Shakespeare uses in Henry V to great advantage, more so than any other Shakespeare play, is the character of the chorus. Now, the chorus in Henry V functions in the same way that the Greek chorus functions. He's there to be the communicator with the audience, to bridge the gap between what's happening on stage and your experience in the audience. And so he's here to tell you what's going on. The chorus in Henry V spends most of his time apologizing to you because we can't create all the big stuff that happened in history on our stage. He apologizes, but he starts out the play, oh, for a muse of fire. He wants you to use your imaginations to bring the play to life. And so, as Mitch mentioned, 19 actors, 50-some roles. So we give the job to DC of taking these 19 actors, well, 2 of them are women, and they're not in the battle, so 17 actors, and one of them's a boy, so we take, well, he's in the battle. So what I'm getting at is, create the Battle of Agincourt. Create the Siege of Harfleur. Tell us that story in the theatrical way of our stage with our resources and our people. So DC, how do you do that?
Very carefully.
Yes. And this is DC's, how many, 8th show with us?
Yeah.
Any physicality you've seen in any play since Romeo and Juliet on our stage has been choreographed and created by DC. That's quite a body of work. And this is the first time you've been in the play.
Yes.
But how do you tell that storytelling with combat? How is it that we don't kill them off every night?
The big obvious difference between stage combat and real combat is that in real combat you are trying to inflict as much pain and suffering and death upon somebody with the weapons as you can in a short period of time. We are trying to enable our actors to do 8 shows a week safely and to not hurt each other. So we take what it looks like, and then it's very, there's a lot of technique to make it safe, and we choreograph it so it's much more like a dance than it is like fighting. But we don't want our dance to be pretty. We want our dance to be very violent and scary, thrilling for the audience, being scared for the characters and the peril that they are in, while the actors on stage, we've rehearsed it enough so that we don't feel perilous. We're not in danger as actors, but our characters are able to play the fact that at any moment we might die. So it's kind of that framework that we have to create of trust with each other. I like to say it's acting just elevated. Always, anytime you put a sword in your hand, the scene that you're going to be playing is the highest stakes that there is. It is always life and death. And so in a microcosm, it is what we want to create in drama everywhere in that little combat scene, because we're using our swords to do it. And the battle scenes are, it's crazy. Again, like we were saying, Agincourt. In Agincourt, the French outnumber the English 5-1. In our play, the English outnumber the French 2-1. So how do you then create this thing where the whole big deal about the battle was so many French who are in their clean, polished armor, glistening and shiny, and the English who have dysentery, aren't wearing pants, and
See, that's all they're going to think about now.
That's all they're going to think about it. But
That's a very interesting parry, by the way.
yeah. But that's part of the whole thrill of that Battle of Agincourt, and why it was so historically significant was the odds were so much in favor of the French. And when you look at the numbers and what should have happened, it's just amazing that it turned out like it did. So how do you show that on the stage? And also the significant problem is it was no question the archers who won that battle for the English. That's why the English won. It's really hard to do archery on stage in any sort of significant way. Partly because in order to be able to shoot a bow really well, you have to train a lot. Part of the reason why English archers were so good is that they trained from kids. It wasn't just the bow that was good, it was the archers who were the weapon. The French could not kill the archer and take their bow, and now they've got it. Not like if you kill somebody, you can take their gun. Now you have their superior firepower. The English had trained for so long, the French and anybody else against them could not pull the bow back all the way. They didn't have enough strength. The English had to train since they were kids to do it. So that was why they were so formidable. That was the English weapon, because they had trained so much at it. But you can't do that on stage. If you have projectiles flying, that's when things go wrong. You can't control anything once it leaves somebody's hand. So, and it's also not really very exciting because archers were hundreds of yards away, right, which we don't have, again, on stage. So we have one moment that Bob and I wanted to be able to at least give a nod to the fact that there's a archery stage, and our props department came up and the costumes came up with a really cool effect that we have in our show of a character being hit with an arrow. It's a really exciting moment. So we have that little nod that, yes, archery played a big part, but most of the time we're using the swords to create this battle on stage. And again, there's not very many of us, and so I try to create, it's all about traffic patterns, right? I'm trying to get, since there's so few people, I'm trying to fill the space, not with 2 people here and 2 people here, but constant movement all around, so that we can get the sense of the chaos and the just the craziness of the battle, right? So that it's swirling. It's this big, huge thing. It's not a static thing. It's very alive and exciting. So there's a lot of running. Henry's leading his troops, and we give a big cry, and then it just breaks into insanity. And it's really not very long. It happens boom, 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 to give us the sense and then we're off stage, and then the next scene happens, and then there's this big flurry of battle again, and then there's a scene that happens on stage. And just one more thing I'll say is it's very different from the other plays that I've done here, like Romeo and Juliet and Hamlet, in which the fights Shakespeare writes are this character says this to this one person, and this other person does this, Tybalt Mercutio, Hamlet and Laertes. There's very, very specific things that have to happen in the fights. Tybalt must stab Mercutio under Romeo's arm. That's what the show has to see to do the thing. Laertes must wound Hamlet with his poisoned sword. Then Hamlet must disarm Laertes and take Laertes' sword and stab Laertes with it. That has to happen to make the play work. And so there is some very specific guidelines for a choreographer, but there's a lot of free reign still in that, of this excitement that you can create, but it's two people, and it's very, very plot driven. These fights, there is never in this one two people who battle against each other. It is only big mass battles. And so the very specific storytelling that you can do with some of the two-person things is not as immediate in this one, but the whole reason I got into theater is I love to tell stories. So my choreography is not choreography. I'd like it to be able to start somewhere. I want it to go somewhere that leads us to the next thing that the play has to do. And to rise the action, particularly for Agincourt, we want to build this up until we get to the end. So we try to escalate and make that sort of, and it's a really different process when it's just a whole bunch of bodies versus two people. But both of them I find really, really thrilling and fun. So.
And this point DC is making is a good one, is that you could do Henry V with no combat in it at all, because there's no stage instruction and no characters talking about, now I'm going to stab you, the way that you do in Hamlet or Romeo and Juliet. It's nothing like that. So the combat, the fighting, the battles, which often dominate Henry V, are not in the play at all. They happen off stage. We choose to bring them to life to help illustrate the conflict of the characters. But it's not a requirement in the play the way it is in some of Shakespeare's other plays. Let's take this opportunity to open up for questions. What would you guys like to know about? For the actors or anything about the play or the prep? Yes? Oh, you need a microphone. Do we have microphones? Here they come.
Hold up your hand, sir.
He's right there. He's right there.
I have a question for Catherine. It might be kind of an indelicate question about a certain scene in the play, but as a teacher of high school dropouts who are trying to get out of the gutter and look at the stars, there's a scene, I want to make it accessible. So there's a scene where I guess it's Phyllis, the chambermaid, is trying to teach English to Catherine. Have you included that? And
Yes,
she misinterprets two words. One starts with an F and one starts with a C. Are those the words I think they are?
Well, this is how we get there. This is why my reading the translations of them in English is so important. Without giving too much away, it is my need to learn English that refers me to Alice, who is the lady in waiting. She does her best to remember, oh, it's been so long, what is the English word you're looking for this French body part? Stay with us on this. French body part that you're asking me about. And as the anatomy lesson develops, I ask her about my hand and my arm and my elbow and my feet and my gown, which at a certain point in our lesson, she remembers incorrectly the sound of the word and maybe adds a T in a certain place that is inappropriate for our audience, but they get to share the secret of having mistaken a word in the translation. Something is lost in the translation, and they think it is a very, that the English version of the French word is a very inappropriate word that would terrify me to have to say before the king, if it ever came up. To bridge the gap with the students, I have to be very careful and tiptoe along that line, because it is a very vulgar word that this audience can appreciate in a refined way that some of the youth of this generation may not be able to appropriately respond to. So we have to walk very carefully. The F word that she mistakenly understands, the translation is the French. The French would be the more offensive. We don't actually say our most offensive F word. We say it in French, which I think gets lost on most people that don't speak it. Does that make sense?
So the idea is that it's in the play, but it's not in the play when we do it for a student matinee.
The line's there.
The lines are
The
there,
lines are
but
there.
not the accompanying gestures that help clarify what the lines mean.
Yes. I use a neon sign for the adult
That's right.
audience. I do not for the kids.
Yeah. Those Elizabethans had a great sense of humor. Yes. There's a mic for you.
Why is it referred to as Henry V rather than Henry V?
Just because we're lazy and we say Henry V, it's actually Henry V. And we've just have moved it towards Henry V because we're lazy. No reason at all. It's Henry V. Yes.
Yeah, I was just wondering, this is sort of from a costuming point of view. I've noticed, I mean, Henry V is obviously period piece, 1500s. But I noticed from looking at the brochures that it almost kind of looks like it has sort of a Victorian air. Some of it. Is there anything interesting you guys did with costuming and the way it works, the period piece, but also with the way Shakespeare can kind of be interpreted in different times, different ways?
Right. Well, it is a history play, which we have a very specific image of what that history is, what the line is, and our production honors the historic line of the close of that era. But again, from both an artistic, visionary point of view and from a practical point of view, we weren't looking to create in every last detail that era. You've got actors changing clothes every 5 minutes. You can't do it. The actors appear at the beginning of the show all in black, dressed all in black. We bring the entire cast out at the beginning of the play during the prologue to let everybody see, here are 19 actors. This is a play. We're not going to pretend like we're 50-some actors and we're sailing in boats and fighting huge battles. We're hopefully placing the play in its appropriate context. And in that context, the costume designer has designed, very ingeniously, I think, costume pieces that allow the actors to reference those periods without doing a head-to-toe change. They've been quite wonderful in the creation of armor, for instance. They've used contemporary items to reference historical lines. So, for instance, the armor that you see in our production are actually motorcycle jackets. But I would defy anybody to come to the play if I hadn't just said that and say, I recognize those as motorcycle jackets, because of the way the costume shop has sort of transformed them into armor. So it is referenced, but again, not historically accurate, because in our production, the English all wear black. Well, they would not have done that. But again, in the tightly controlled artistic palette of this play, where we are looking to create the best possible story that we can create, we've looked to take us out of the historic, not be sort of anchored or slavish to the history, but to honor the history and the storytelling of this play. So it's a fascinating, the costumes are one of the best things in the show. I love the way our costume designer, Marianne Custer, has created these costumes. And it allows these actors to work very quickly, very fast, in terms of what they have to take off and put back on. But it's a modern version of the contemporary, of the period line. Yes, ma'am? Let the mic come back up here. Up, right here.
Did you edit any of it, or do we hear every single word?
You do not hear every single word. I did edit it. And, there's no one version of Henry V. It's not like you can go to the store and buy the play as Shakespeare wrote it. The idea of publishing was very different in Shakespeare's day than it is today. There are different versions of Henry V and different interpretations of how the text works. So my research began last spring, and I began researching all of the different versions of the text and the scholarship that accompanies the different versions of the text. Is it this word or is it that word? Is the punctuation there? Is the punctuation over here? There is a line in the play that the Duke of Orleans has. He comes on in Act 4, and the sentence is, and help me out on this, it is, the sun doth gild our armor, up my lords. Okay? Where's the punctuation in that line? In some texts, it's, the sun doth gild our armor, period, up my lords. In others, it's, the sun doth gild our armor, my lords. So you have to make a decision about which of those versions you want to use. And it's like that throughout the entire play, this or that. I have removed 2 scenes in the play that reference the character of Falstaff, because Falstaff is a character that exists in Henry IV. He doesn't exist in Henry V, but there are scenes about him. So I took those scenes out because we weren't doing Henry IV, and so our audience wouldn't have that connection to a character that never appears in the play. Once you take Falstaff out, that changes all the scenes Mitch is in. So there's editing going on there. I moved a couple of scenes around to help clarify what I thought was the best way of telling the story of the French and English in the Battle of Agincourt. So I have moved some scenes. I have done a lot of cutting. It took me about 3 months to edit the play in the way that I wanted to edit it. Some of it is for practical reasons. Some of it is taking out some of the references that would have enlivened Shakespeare's audience that have no relevance to us today in terms of what they're referencing. So yes, I spent a long time editing this play, and hopefully it will be unnoticeable. Yes? Yes, ma'am, in the back. Here she comes with the mic.
This is a corollary to the costuming one. As an artistic director, you have a certain space. You have a play that spans lots of times, lots of areas. What do you think of when you're thinking about your scenery and your stagecraft?
Mm-hmm. I'm very fortunate to have a wonderful collaborative team. To me, not always, but this play began with an image. As I was beginning to read about the history of Agincourt, and whether I'm reading Keegan or whether I'm reading some other historic reference about what happened in the battle, there was one central image, and it's the image that we create sort of in a modified way in our play. It's the image of the French knights in their beautiful, pristine armor, and the way one English arrow can pierce that armor and end that noble's life. And that image is where I started with a lot of my conversations. The play is so epic, and there is a cliche in theater that if the text of the play is dense, you have an airy and open and minimalist physical environment. If the text of the play is shallow and thin, you have much more set. That's why so many of our contemporary plays have big, elaborate, realistic sets. And that's not a dig at contemporary plays, it's just a difference in structure. Shakespeare's plays are often open and bare. Shakespeare begins the play Henry V talking about this wooden O. And so Mike Nichols, our set designer, who is celebrating his 30th year designing sets at Arkansas Rep, and when you come see Henry V, go up to the second mezz and there will be an exhibit of his work, photographs, drawings, etc., models. So go check that out because it's an amazing thing that we have such a wonderful artist working 30 years at Arkansas Rep. And so our conversations began with this sense of openness, this sense of creating so many different locations. How do you do that? I don't like set changes. As a director, I don't like to have set changes because I think it impedes the ideas of the play. This play is about the language. This play is about the words. Let's get out of the way and let the words come to life. And so in that sense, Mike created a very open playing space that still gave us the opportunity to create levels. I like to work, when I can work in a classic sense, I like to work on what's called a raked stage. And that is a stage that's lower in the bottom, lower towards the audience than it is towards the back. The downstage towards the audience is here, the upstage is here. That creates a relationship. That's how our old European opera houses were all created, on a raked stage. It allows you to create perspective that's not realistic, but allows you to create relationships on stage in a very dynamic way that a flat stage can't do. because as an audience member, you can see more of the people in the back when you're on a raked stage. So I always like to work, whenever I can, on a raked stage. So Mike gave me an amazing raked stage with different levels that allowed us to bring the play to life very simply. Yes? Here comes this mic.
Do you have any particular actors or actresses who have played these parts whom you feel have done exceptional jobs, or maybe even role models, or somebody you would have in mind that you'd be thinking of as you portray Henry, or Catherine, or Archbishop?
I guess I'll field that one first. As he said, Henry V is one of the great characters that he said defines an actor's career. Fortunately, I got to do Hamlet before it, so Henry V wasn't as terrified. Once you do To Be or Not to Be, you know, who cares? Again, I would probably have to go with Branagh. He was younger than I was, I think significantly younger than I was when he did the film, much less when he performed on stage in London, or was he in Stratford?
No, it was in London. He was 23, I think.
Yeah, which is amazing. But I would probably have to go with him on that one. I didn't really... The difference, I guess, with this one was, with Hamlet, I didn't like any Hamlet I've ever seen live, any Hamlet on film. I did not like any of them. So I had a freer reign with that one, because Hamlet is so all over the place. There's no right way to do that part. There's no right way to do any part. But I would have to take my hat off to Branagh as his Henry V. I think is really phenomenal. D'Olivier is great for his vocal command, but my acting style acting has changed through the course of over the years. Generationally, it kind of changes, and he as an actor is so far removed to what I look for in an actor. Vocally, his technique is superb, but it's not. I want a little bit more heart in it. So I'd have to go with Branagh for this role, definitely, as being highly influential.
I would say, in stark contrast to Ophelia, I didn't really have a point of reference when I first approached the role. I had seen it done in college by an all-female company, and I got to see the girl role and went, oh, that's so wonderful, that's a fun role, she's so funny, I'll never play it, I don't speak French. And then Bob said, well, we're going to do it, do you think you could have the time to learn the French? And I went, oh, I never thought of that. So it always was, to me, a role I would never play. It wasn't ever on my list because I thought it was out of reach as a skill that I didn't have. And then having done Ophelia for him, and then having done the woman in a funny play of 39 Steps, I was able to sort of merge them in this to say, I have the capacity to be specific with the comedy to help you understand it, even though I'm doing it in a different language, which is something new for me. So I didn't see Emma Thompson do it in the Brenna until after I'd already started working on it. So it kind of kept, there were little bits of things that you could steal, or you could say, I love the way she does that, or that's very specific and very clear. But each time that I came to it, I said, oh, well, I'm much goofier than that woman. I'm much more silly, or I'm younger than the woman playing it. Not as young as Catherine, but younger than the woman in the role that I would see. So I kind of got to take all of those things, mix them up, and then put my own layer on top of it, I think.
And we consciously stay away, once we're in rehearsal, we consciously stay away from watching what other people are doing, so that it's too easy to copy them and to go, oh, well, he did it like this. And that's not to say that we're not influenced by those choices. We talk a lot about the Kenneth Branagh film because it's so famous. But come see our play before you see the Branagh film. Because it's a very different animal to see a play live on stage the way it was intended to be experienced by an audience. How are we good? We need to wrap? Good. I want to thank these actors for getting up this morning and coming and joining us here. And I want to thank all of you and the Clinton School for being here today. Thank you very much.